Okay, so welcome to part two of our new server setup video series. And so now what we're going to do is we're going to do some setup and configuration that we need to do. So what we're going to do now is we're going to set up the server both for Internet Information Services and for SQL servers. So we have Server Manager, which is a part of Microsoft Server. And the first thing we're going to want to do is we're going to want to install the web server, the IIS role. There are roles within, there are roles that need to be installed within the server itself. Okay, so we're going to go to Add Roles and Features. And there's going to be obviously the usual warnings here. Make sure the administrator account has a strong password. We've already set up the server and the administrator account, so that's been done already. We have the IP address. All the stuff has been configured because we set up our server providers. So we're just going to go ahead and click next. Now we want to do a role-based or feature-based installation. We're not doing a virtual desktop here, so we'll just click next. And so we're going to select the server from the server pool. Obviously, there's only one here. This is the one we're working with, so it's the only choice. So we'll click next. And now we're going to select our web server, which should be here. Web server, Internet IIS, or Internet Information Server. And we're going to want to add some features to this. So include management tools. Okay, so there's going to be a few features we're going to want to add on here. Okay, so for now we're going to ignore the features tab. We're going to go right to the web server role, IIS. And then we're going to click next. And that's going to bring us down to the role services. So there's a few things we want to make sure are installed here. So we got the web server. It looks like we have everything we need here. Again, we're going to limit this to the most basic setup. And so we're just going to keep the default configuration here. We're not doing WebDAV. We're not doing HTTP reproduction. So, yeah, we're just going to leave this. We're not setting up an FTP server. I mean, again, your results may vary. You may have other things that you need, other specialized services. But again, for the purposes of this video, we're trying to keep it very generic. So I'm just going to click next for now. It does appear to be gone now. Okay, so we're going to go ahead and click install. And that will install all of the IIS roles. And you can see what it's putting in: web server, default document, directory browsing, all the HTTP stuff, all the stuff we need to have websites, to use this as a web server. So we'll just sit back and wait for this to install. Okay, so it appears that we're done now. So I'm going to go ahead and click close. And at this point, we're ready to go into IIS. Internet Information Services. Okay, and so we're not going to go any further with this for now. We have the default website set up, which you can certainly go to. There's not really much to browse to. I'm not going to really set up a new website here because the objective here of this video series is to transfer sites from another server. And if you remember, we backed up the sites from the old server. So I'm going to stop this here because we're going to do something different in terms of transferring sites over. So we'll get out of here. And now we need to do some setup items for SQL Server as well. Because you saw at the end of the last video, we had SQL Server set up, which is fine. I mean, we've done everything we need to do, all the basic setup steps. Except if we try to access SQL Server from another computer, we won't be able to. And that's because we have to do a couple of things here. We have to set SQL Server up for remote access, and we also have to set the authentication settings. Right now, and I'm not going to presume any particular experience level with SQL Server, but right now you see it's set to log on with Windows authentication, meaning that we're not logging. We don't have any SQL Server user account set up. We have we have an account set up, this one right here, but it's using Windows authentication. In other words, it say, well, as long as if you're logged on to Windows, you're okay with me. We're just gonna use the Windows login and use that as the SQL Server login, and that's the way that the default is set up. But what we really want is we want to be able to create SQL Server accounts, right? So right now you see the server authentication, Windows authentication mode only by default. So even if we set up an SQL Server account and try to log into it, it won't log in because until we change the setting here. So we're going to start with that. Okay, might as well restart it. No one's connected yet. Okay, now we want to be able to enable remote connections on SQL Server. So what we're going to do, I'm going to close this, and we're going to go right to Windows Firewall. We want to make sure the right ports are open. We're going to go right to Advanced Settings. Now, let's make this a little bit bigger if we can. So we're going to go to inbound rules. So we want to make sure the right ports are open. Now, for SQL Server, the default is 1433 on TCP. So we got to make sure that is open. Okay, so we're going to go to the action panel here. We're going to select new rule. And then we're going to go by port. TCP 1433. And we're going to allow the connection because port 1433 is what SQL Server listens on. So we want to make sure other servers can get to that, can get through the firewall on it. So we're going to name the inbound rule. We'll just say SQL Server port 1433, just something so we recognize it. Won't bother with a description. Oh, there it is. Okay, now we need to set the protocol, so we're going to close this. We're going to go into SQL Server Configuration Manager. All right, so this is another tool that's in here. Maybe we'll pin this one to the start for now. I don't know if we need to leave it there, but at least it's convenient to have it there for now. Okay, so what we want to do here is we want to go to Network Configuration Manager. Let's expand this a little bit. Now you notice over here, TCP/IP, that's how other machines are going to connect. That's disabled. Well, we can't have that because if it's disabled, it means the server's not listening on TCP/IP at all. So that's the first thing we have to do. Service, okay, we'll certainly stop and start the service. In fact, let's go ahead and do that anyway. That's we only have that one instance on here. Let's just restart it. Only take a second. Now make that 10 seconds. Something like that. Okay, let's start it again. Great. So now let's go back. So now we want to test this to make sure that we can get in. So let's go ahead and open SQL Server Management. We're going to go back into the Management Studio. We're going to test. We have to basically simulate trying to connect to this computer from the outside. Because if I just use the same login we've been doing, it's obviously going to let us in because we're going internally. So the way we're going to test this remote connection is we're just going to use the IP address /SQL Express. This will cause us to connect to SQL Server as though we were connecting from the outside. I do want to point out a couple of things. First of all, you have to make sure that SQL Server browser is automatic and then make sure it's running and enabled. Otherwise, you're not even listening for outside servers. And there was one more thing we had to add to the Windows Firewall, and that was UDP 1434. So 1433 TCP, 1434 UDP. Those are necessary for SQL Server to listen for outside connections. And once we got that going, we're able to connect as though we were connecting from the outside. So our SQL Server and our IIS for websites is now set up, and we're ready to go ahead and start the transfer of the database and the website from our old server, and we'll do that in the next video.